Hello, I'm Kimberly George. Welcome to the 8th season of Outfront Ideas with Kimberly and Mark. Outfront Ideas was created to offer webinars and conference sessions which are designed to stimulate industry conversations around important topics that we feel need more attention. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Safety National and Sedgwick.
Hi, I'm Mark Walls. Today is our annual Issues to Watch webinar. This is always our most attended webinar of the year, and it frames up the issues we will be discussing in more depth later in the year. Some of these issues may be familiar to you, while some may be things that you've not considered much. Our goal with this webinar is to promote industry discussions around these important issues. For your reference, this webinar is being recorded so you can listen to the archive later. We'll also push out a column outlining the issues discussed in the webinar probably next week. We've got 20 issues to discuss, so let's get started. All right, leading off is 2024 is a presidential election year. Right now, the leading candidates for both major parties are viewed negatively in most polls, and the majority of Americans don't want to see a rematch of the 2020 election. Yet, here we are. This election, like every federal election, could have significant implications on policies that impact both businesses and individuals. One federal policy that's getting ready to have significant impact on the workforce is the Department of Labor's new rules around independent contractor classification, which were just released this morning and will take effect on March 11th. The goal of these rules is to significantly reduce the number of workers classified as independent contractors, and they were based on California's AB5, which has been a challenge for both businesses and workers in the state of California. Expect a lot of litigation around these rules, just like California's seen with AB5. From an insurance standpoint, the most important elections to watch tend to be the governors. Insurance is regulated at the state level, and the governors have significant influence over policy in their state, which often includes appointing insurance regulators. In 2024, there are 11 gubernatorial offices on the ballot in Delaware, Indiana, Missouri, Montana, New Hampshire, North Carolina, North Dakota, Utah, Vermont, Washington, and West Virginia. Only 2 of those races, New Hampshire and North Carolina, are currently rated as toss-ups by political rating organizations. New Hampshire currently has a government trifecta, meaning one party controls the governor and both houses of the legislature. North Carolina currently has a Democrat governor and Republican control of both houses. Government trifectas make it easier for a party to push through their agenda, so keep an eye on these races. Louisiana held their elections last year, and they now have a new Republican trifecta, along with a new Republican insurance commissioner. Some in the state hope this means there'll be workers' compensation reforms. However, the insurance commissioner just announced a 9% workers' compensation rate reduction, and he's publicly stated that his focus is on the homeowners and personal auto insurance reforms, where Louisiana has some of the highest rates in the country. I personally doubt workers' compensation reforms will gain traction in this environment, at least not this year. Looking at potential legislation for 2024, Georgia was ranked this year as the #1 judicial hellhole. Now, that's not a national title that they cherish. Because of that, there's an expectation that tort reform legislation will be introduced to address this. Last year, Florida passed comprehensive tort reforms, and it still remains to be seen if those reforms will survive court challenges and lead to the cost savings for consumers and businesses that were promised. Finally, there are always several workers' compensation bills that get through the California legislature which would increase claim costs. For several years, the governor has vetoed most of these bills because of the impact they would have on the state budgets. But California is always a legislative jurisdiction to watch. Kimberly?
Next up, we have economic outlook. According to JP Morgan, economic growth is likely to decelerate in 2024 as the effects of monetary policy take a broader toll and post-pandemic tailwinds fade. Inflation, high interest rates, and rising consumer debt are contributing to the forecast. Economists' opinions vary regarding interest rate changes in 2024. While one camp believes rates will be lowered in March, Morgan Stanley suggests a cut is more likely to happen in June. Even with the anticipated cuts in interest rates, inflation will remain above the Fed's long-term inflation target of 2%. Mortgage rates are expected to drop from around 7% where they are today to 6.1 to 6.5 by the end of the year. For those currently with a 3 to 4% interest rate, some even lower, doubling that with new property is less than appealing. The commercial property market continues to have challenges, with office occupancy well below pre-pandemic levels and unlikely to rebound anytime soon. When leases expire, many companies are downsizing their office footprint, which is leading to rising commercial vacancy levels. Financial Times reported last week that $117 billion of commercial mortgages related to offices either need to be repaid or refinanced by the end of 24. Refinancing obviously will result in higher interest rates. Some property owners have walked away, letting the bank take over, and other large commercial properties have sold for a fraction of the pre-pandemic valuation. According to KPMG, the M&A volume, mergers and acquisitions volume, in 2024 will be in the technology, health IT, and physician practice sectors. S&P Global suggests creative deal structures and a relentless focus on value creation in private equity portfolios are critical in the year ahead. I completely agree that value creation is top of mind. Successful companies must find that sweet spot between cost cutting and driving growth. Mark?
One quick comment on the commercial property market. We have a lot of public entities in our audience, and one thing I can't help but wonder is the impact these diminished property valuations is going to have on their property taxes and ultimately the budgets for these municipalities. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. Next up is geopolitical risks. The geopolitical risk in the world right now is higher than it's been in years. There are active wars in the Middle East and Ukraine, along with the threat of conflict between the US and China over Hong Kong. These geopolitical risks can impact companies in a variety of ways. For example, the Suez Canal carries 12% of global trade. Terrorists have been attacking ships in the Red Sea, which leads to the Suez Canal. These attacks could lead to loss of cargo, endanger crews, and also cause supply chain delays. In recent months, there have been violent protests throughout Europe, and the wars in the Middle East and Ukraine have potential to spread. If you have employees that travel overseas for business, it's important to know where they are and have plans to evacuate them if unrest develops. From a risk management standpoint, a complicating factor in dealing with these risks is that many insurance and reinsurance contracts have war risk exclusion clauses. These may not only exclude coverage for bodily injury or property damage deemed to have come from war risk, but also things like business interruption and cyber incidents. It's important for risk managers to work closely with their brokers and carriers to understand what their potential exposures are that may be subject to a war risk exclusion. Kimberly?
Next up, we have employee benefits. Employers have continued to expand benefit programs to align with the expectations and needs of their workforce, and 2024 will be no different. In fact, there are so many specialty care and voluntary benefit programs that it is a challenge for employees to manage their vast array of partners and ensure employees are aware of and engaging in. Specialty health solutions have expanded far beyond traditional chronic disease and diabetes management. Family planning benefits are on the rise, supporting employees with fertility and IVF, pregnancy loss, and maternity management. Employers may now offer transgender inclusive benefits and partner with companies like Folks Health that specialize in trans care. The age-inclusive benefit space now include menopause care. Companies such as Maven Clinic offer access to virtual specialists and wellness coaches with expertise in menopause. Menopause often impacts employees at the height of their career, and it is beneficial to both the employee and employer for the employee to remain as healthy and productive as possible. Financial wellness programs continue to be important to the workforce and offered through employee benefits, with emphasis on employee discount programs, basic money management tools, 401k, and education about investing and financial planning. Healthcare navigation continues to be an important element for plan members. Who to go to for what and when, and what will be my cost. Insureds have experienced improved customer service and support through their health plans over the past few years, and companies such as Accolade continue to perform well and have significantly advanced their point solutions within the platform. A new entrant in the health plan space is Surest. No deductibles and no co-insurance. With the Surest health plan, there is full price transparency for each service and provider. Before making an appointment, the insured can compare treatment options with price across a network of doctors, hospitals, and clinics. I've often shared with our Outfront Ideas audience that insurance models are designed around sick care and not well care. And the founders of Surest are hoping their insureds will invest more in health to reduce sickness. Related to health plan, Mercer projected employer health benefits would rise 5.4% in 2024 after making plan changes to slow the increases. This is up from a decade of 3.4% yearly increases. If no changes were made, the increase in 2024 would have been closer to 6.6%. Benefit managers are currently grappling with the onslaught of weight loss drugs. GLP-1 coverage, the Ozempics, Wegovy's, etc. Coverage is expected to double and is projected to be a $22 billion market by 2030. So they're really having to look at who do we cover and what are we going to pay, because more and more plan members want to be able to take this drug beyond those that they were originally designed for. Other pharmacy issues to watch include the ongoing rise of specialty medications and the complexity surrounding who pays and what is the cost. Some of these fall to the PBM, while others the medical plan, and each with very different pricing. According to ALM Benefits Pro, a government report found the median percentage difference between the two was 49%. A problem for sure. Mark?
All right, next up is frequency rates. According to NCCI data, workers' compensation accident frequency rates have mostly trended downward the last 20 years. One of the results of this have been declining workers' compensation rates for many businesses. However, recent data suggests this trend might be changing. Reports from the Bureau of Labor Statistics released in November and December showed that for 2022, private industry employers saw a 4.5% increase in workplace injuries and a 5.7% increase in fatal work injuries. The overall workplace injury rate was essentially flat compared to 2021. However, when work-related illnesses were factored in, the frequency rate was up. The rate of fatal work injuries also increased compared to 2021. Data from large employers and public entity has shown that for many, their overall accident frequency rates increased in 2023. Some attribute this to understaffing and the high number of new employees. There have been numerous industry studies that illustrate the fact that new employees have a higher accident frequency rate than more experienced workers. For risk managers, this emphasizes the importance of pre-employment physicals and safety training programs. In a rush to fill positions, Sometimes these standards are relaxed, which can lead to higher injury rates. You just can't cut corners with safety. Kimberly?
Next up, we have climate change. We have previously mentioned climate change in past issues to watch because of the impact it was having on the property insurance market. However, this year we made climate change a standalone issues to watch because of the multiple areas impacting risk management. 2023 was the hottest year in recorded history. All across the US, cities smashed previous records for the number of consecutive days with record temperatures. This is forcing risk managers to reevaluate heat safety for their workforce. Cal OSHA passed new heat-related prevention guidelines, and federal OSHA is also working on new rules in this area. If this impacts you, consider an indoor air quality assessment. You may need to consider additional water and rest stations, ventilation, and maybe even cooling centers. Last June, risk managers in New York City and other urban areas in the Northeast faced a risk they probably never prepared for. Wildfire smoke from Canadian fires left the city and other areas covered with a thick blanket of smoke. This forced risk managers to evaluate not only their workers' exposure to poor air quality outdoors, but also indoors. I remember sitting next to a risk manager at the airport, and his company was closing a factory in New Jersey because of poor air quality. Finally, climate change is also impacting supply chain changes, which can disrupt business operations. The Panama Canal, which handles approximately 5% of seaborne trade, has been operating at a significantly reduced capacity for several months. Lack of rainfall has reduced water flow into the canal, which is necessary to operate it. Rainfall is 30% below normal. That not only means that shipping delays occur, but also significantly higher prices for companies shipping through the canal. Climate change is not a political issue. It is a reality that many risk managers are now having to deal with. Mark?
Next up is medical inflation. According to data from NCCI, WCRI, and others, medical inflation in workers' compensation has been less than general inflation. However, this only tells part of the story of how inflation is impacting workers' compensation. Most workers' compensation medical costs are controlled by fee schedules. The majority of these fee schedules are tied to Medicare reimbursement rates. Most fee schedules do not have automatic adjustment provisions, so in periods of inflation, it can take time for the increased cost to be reflected. Providers are pushing for fee schedule revisions because in the last year, they have seen an increase in labor and material costs. It's just a matter of time until we start to see these fee schedule changes, and I anticipate we'll see a lot of them in 2024. As an example of what to expect, Illinois has an automatic inflation adjustment built into their medical fee schedule. Because of this, effective January 1st, the cost for most workers' compensation medical services in Illinois went up by 8.3%. For medical services not covered by fee schedules, significant inflation is already being seen. This includes things like attendant care, long-term care, transportation costs, and durable medical equipment. A large loss study by NCCI in 2023 highlighted that the costs associated with these services have gone up as much or greater than general inflation in the last year. Attendant care services in particular are costing significantly more due to a shortage of qualified providers, especially in certain areas of the country. The reality is, medical inflation is happening in workers' compensation, and in 2024, expect this to get worse. Kimberly?
Yeah, next up, we're going to talk about property insurance. While many would say we are past the headwinds related to property insurance placement, the changing risk dynamics due to weather-related events continues to be a concern. As noted recently in Insurance Business America, the North American property insurance market will start to see more stability and capacity in 2024, and barring major catastrophes, insureds should expect to receive relief after years of price increases. Although the market is improving, risk managers are increasingly seeking property resilience assessments. These assessments include physical climate risk, mitigation measures, and support development of a climate-ready, long-term sustainable plan. When considering physical climate risks, an assessment may cover wind, precipitation, drought, wildfire, earthquakes, sea level rise, extreme temperatures, and more, all of these impacting the safety of the structure and surrounding areas, in addition to the employees. Understanding the risks then lead to a mitigation plan and affords a risk manager and their business stakeholders determine what risk mitigation measures are most meaningful to their property resilience approach. Keep in mind, risk mitigation through sustainable construction may be costly and not translate to lower property insurance premiums. I would like to think it will be a savings in coming years, but today that does not tend to be the case. While carriers may perform similar assessments related to accuracy evaluations and as an added benefit to their insured, many risk managers and insurance buyers select independent partners to perform these assessments, believing that they have an unbiased review in doing so. In addition to property insurance, climate risk assessments and mitigation and adaptation recommendations may be useful for a company's ESG initiatives. The insurtech world has locked in on property insurance, similar to what they've done in the auto space, and assisting currently with underwriting, risk mitigation, and claims management. Real-time and historical weather data, coupled with a suite of tech tools, AI and machine learning, to name a few, are providing meaningful insights to those of us working in the property space. From early detection and communications to streamlining the claims process and restoring property, insights from these tools are advancing quickly. As a final thought, analytically driven property risk quantification provides risk managers the transparency they need to create an optimal strategy for their organization. These insights also improve negotiation power when challenging or partnering with insurers around assumptions and securing coverage. You're up next, Mark.
All right, up next is liability verdicts. For several years, the number of commercial liability auto insurance verdicts above $10 million has been increasing, as has the average of the 20 largest verdicts. The expectations are we will see more of the same in 2024. Juries are increasingly hostile toward both big business and public entities and desensitized to the large dollar awards. This may not only lead to awards in cases that appear defendable, but also to monetary awards that go well beyond anything seen before. When something bad happens to someone, juries want that person compensated regardless of negligence. And when a baseball player receives a $700 million contract, a jury doesn't feel a $10 million award is excessive. This phenomena is also often called social inflation or nuclear verdicts, but what it really is legal system abuse. Plaintiff attorneys use a variety of tactics, including abuse of advertising, marketing, and litigation tactics to taint jury pools into viewing businesses, public entities, and insurance carriers as the enemy who have access to unlimited funds. According to the U.S. Chamber Institute for Legal Reforms, the average household pays more than $3,600 in higher costs annually for goods and services because of unnecessary and abusive litigation. In addition, third-party litigation funding allows uninvolved investors to provide litigation costs on behalf of the plaintiff in exchange for a portion of the verdict. This incentivizes plaintiffs and attorneys to take cases to trial rather than settle because of the limited financial downside of doing so. The solution to the challenge of legal system abuse is tort reform. However, these have been slow to materialize. In the meantime, businesses can expect to see their insurance and claims costs continue to rise as the jury awards continue to increase. Kimberly?
And now we'll talk about the leave and accommodation landscape. As with more recent years, the leave of absence space continues to evolve. Employers are faced with implementing new company and state programs, and it is keeping my team and employers very busy. January 1st, Illinois implemented paid leave for all workers. The employee's leave accrues in 1-hour increments for every 40 hours worked, up to 5 days of leave for work each year. Workers can use this leave for absolutely any reason, and employers may not require workers to provide a basis for their time off. Employees with at least 90 days of employment may begin to take their accrued leave, and they are paid, 100% of their wage. Proudly, Governor Pritzker said, Illinois is the most pro-worker state in the nation, and the Paid Leave for All Workers Act is a prime example of those values translating into action. We will see more movement on paid family and medical leave at the state level. Leave programs may include pregnancy loss, bereavement beyond an immediate family member, and organ donation. Some states like Michigan, New Mexico, and Illinois will try to push through paid family medical leave programs ahead of the elections, while other states work to implement paid family leave insurance policies similar to what we currently see in Florida, Tennessee, Texas, and Virginia. Leave laws are complex for multi-state employers and require significant administration, coordination across the business, and communication to implement and manage. Be sure and pay attention to regulatory updates around leaves, as a push for paid leave, regardless of reason, is likely to hit more states. The other issue to watch in this area are legislation moving through Congress and the states regarding transparency with drug pricing. While not directly impacting short-term disability and absence, these laws are starting to mount legal challenges to ERISA and the preemption of state PBM laws. How the courts rule can have a major impact on ERISA protections, which will impact short-term and long-term disability plans. If they invalidate the preemption clause, that could open up group benefit plans to lawsuits at the state level, which are usually less favorable to employers. Also, the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act sees proposed regulation changes and enhanced enforcement, and this could impact employers significantly if the changes are adopted. In short, the changes would limit employer health and disability plans from providing less favorable benefit plans to employees in the area of mental health and substance abuse. So, for example, this change could potentially impact the 24-month limitation on mental health benefits under most LTD, long-term disability benefit plans, which could lead to significant cost in long-term disability programs offered. The EEOC has yet to issue the final ruling on the Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act, or Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. They were due December 30th and have yet to come. This is a new law that requires covered employers to provide reasonable accommodations related to pregnancy, childbirth, or other related medical conditions. The final rules could impact an employer's leave and accommodation policies. The EEOC noted in their strategic release plan that enforcement under the PWFA, the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, was a top priority, and we are already seeing cases brought against employers. Preliminary data for 2023 shows a 50% increase in lawsuits over 2022. ADA was the primary driver of the lawsuits in 2023. So expect that trend to continue. Mark?
All right, the GL Auto Marketplace is such a challenge, it rated 2 issues to watch. And the next is the liability insurance tower challenges. Another factor increasing costs and creating challenges for businesses, public entities, and insurance carriers are the challenges associated with managing liability insurance towers. The coverage layers above the primary one may have different terms, conditions, and exclusions. In addition, some employers are finding it difficult and expensive to find adequate coverage limits given the increasing awards that are being seen. For example, last year, we mentioned PFAs or forever chemicals as an issue to watch. As litigation over that issue expanded in 2023, we saw more reinsurers start to exclude that from their coverage. The potential for bad faith exposure is also creating a challenge for insurance carriers. If a claim does not settle within the primary insurance layer, carriers could face a claim of bad faith from the higher reinsurance layers. Essentially, they could claim that the case should have been resolved within the primary layer. This can put carriers in the middle between their policyholders who want to take a case to trial and the reinsurers who threaten bad faith litigation if there's an adverse jury verdict. This bad faith exposure is not always contemplated by brokers and policyholders, and because of that, they may not fully understand a carrier's reluctance to take a case to trial. While the policyholder may only have exposures up to their policy attachment points, the carrier can have exposures well beyond their policy limits because of the potential for a bad faith lawsuit. Kimberly?
Yeah, and now up, let's talk about adverse reserve development. When you hear talk of carriers releasing reserves, that means they feel their claim development from prior years is lower than expected, and they feel comfortable lowering their actuarial projected surplus reserves and moving those funds over to profit or shoring up reserves in other lines. On the flip side, reserve strengthening means the claim development on past years is higher than expected, requiring carriers to increase their actuarial reserves. The last few years, many carriers have released reserves from prior years in multiple lines of coverage. A column in Insurance Insider US on January 2nd, so just days ago, raised concerns that the insurance industry may find itself needing to increase tail claim reserves in multiple lines because of a variety of factors. As mentioned earlier, commercial general liability and auto awards continue to increase to record levels, well beyond what was anticipated when the coverage was underwritten. There is also still a backlog of pending cases in the courts because of the shutdowns during COVID. Most of the large awards you hear about today are from incidents that happened 7 to 10 years ago. As these cases work their way through the courts, will these trends of growing awards continue? Second, the current inflation rates are much higher than was anticipated on claims prior to 2019. That means increased costs for auto and property repairs, but also higher costs for some medical services. And as we've talked about on Outfront Ideas, and Mark's already mentioned, home health care to be included in that. Third, the impact of climate change means the property carriers are seeing more extensive losses than before. They have responded by increasing rates, but these increases are not keeping up with the losses that are developing. Finally, for several years, carriers have been releasing reserves on the workers' compensation line, mostly because of frequency declines. However, some carriers are now reporting adverse development on their workers' compensation tail claims due to a combination of rapidly escalating attendant care costs and also longer life expectancy for severely and catastrophically injured workers. Because of medical advances, some workers and severe injuries patients with severe injuries who were initially projected to live 10 years or less are living 30 plus years, all while needing round-the-clock nursing and attendant care. If these higher tail costs are paired with frequency leveling out, this could impact workers' compensation rates going forward. Risk managers and brokers should pay attention to the carrier earning calls. If they start to hear comments around the need to strengthen reserves and lines of coverage, this may be a signal that rates could increase or the carrier might pull back from certain lines of coverage. Mark?
Next up is sustainability and regulations. For the last few years, environmental, social, and governance, or ESG issues, have been an increasing area of focus for businesses. However, in the United States, some of these issues have become extremely politicized, and to try to diffuse the politics in the US, there's been a shift to calling these things sustainability instead of ESG, but the core issues remain the same. Employers are dealing with increasing regulations from specific states, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the federal government, and the European Union. These regulations are far-reaching and cover diverse things like climate emissions, workforce and board demographics, and even investments. Employers are not only having to track all their data on these issues, but also the data of their suppliers and business partners. Publicly traded companies have also faced shareholder lawsuits pertaining to these issues. State insurance regulators are putting carriers in the middle of political battles over climate issues. One state will try to restrict carriers from insuring or investing in fossil fuel companies, while other states will penalize insurers who refuse to insure such things. Last year, there were threats of antitrust lawsuits against carriers from a number of states because of these issues. No matter the label, the core issues relating to climate change, workforce demographics, and regulatory compliance are important to all employers and their workforce. Ensuring compliance with the increasing number of regulations is an increasing challenge for businesses. Kimberly?
Next up, we have human capital. And Mark and I have had employee retention, talent attraction, training, upskilling, reskilling, all types of talent issues on our past year issues to watch. But this continues to be a very important 2024 issues to watch. So here we are, human capital. The December 2023 U.S. jobs report indicates we have more job openings than job seekers. Mark and I find this interesting as we are each parents of recent college graduates, and we can tell you that landing a job is anything but easy. Internships, past work experience, great grades, and reputable universities are not enough. Networking is key, but not all have connections. Ghosting candidates is a problem in the insurance industry and talent attraction and acquisition across the United States. It's difficult to reconcile the data from jobs report with the experience of people we know who are actively looking for jobs. Just think of what you see each day on LinkedIn. Talent attraction is evolving how they source candidates into the insurance industry, and we think this is positive. We're seeing intentional efforts to recruit veterans, stay-at-home parents returning to the workforce, people with disabilities, and high school graduates looking for a career where they can grow and develop. There are increasing conversations around skills-based hiring within insurance and more broadly, the U.S. marketplace. This may open positions for those without a college degree or even years of experience, but they have the skill sets necessary to complete the roles. Companies are increasingly using artificial intelligence tools to assess competencies for their potential candidate pool. This provides companies a view of candidate skills across open positions beyond what one may have applied for. The process of hiring the right people, developing people leaders, training and developing workers for their jobs today and those needed for tomorrow, upskilling and reskilling workers to produce stellar customer service and superior outcomes is top of mind for business leaders and the boardroom, whether you're in HR, operations, client relationships, or sales. It's all our job to hire the right people, develop them, and deliver results. Boomers are retiring at a fast pace, and millennials and Gen Z are a significant percentage of the workforce. In my own company, they make up over 50% of our 32,000 plus colleagues. What worked in 2020 is not adequate for the workplace expectations and needs of today. From learning and development, employee engagement programs, DEI, ESG, and culture, just to name a few. As we saw during the labor strikes of 2023, the issue of a 4-day work week is expected to be a hot topic from some sectors. Some companies are starting with 1 day off every other week or half-day Fridays. Opinions vary on the productivity gain or loss with a shortened work week. Regardless of the 4-day work week, we do anticipate continued work at home and hybrid models. Willis Towers Watson conducted a salary budget survey in just December 2023 and found that US employers are planning for an average salary increase of 4% this year as compared to 4.4% in 2023 and 3.1% in 21 and earlier years. Inflation and tight labor market are reasons for the planned increases. And before we move to the next topic, we want to touch on turnover. While the pandemic brought significant challenges around staffing, most would say turnover has settled down and we're back to business as usual. People leaders are working to ensure their seasoned team, their tenured team, are content, and their new hires are being adequately trained and developed. What needs to happen to retain these employees, though, beyond what we've already discussed? Do not minimize the importance of tools you provide your team to perform their work. Archaic systems and processes, redundant and duplicative tasks are less tolerated by the tech-savvy workforce of today. Workflow design and creating a smart work environment is important to all, your employees and your customers. Next up, here you go, Mark.
Next up is evolving presumptions. For several years, the most common form of workers' compensation legislation that has been enacted has been related to presumptions for first responders. These laws used to cover diseases of the heart and lungs, and in recent years expanded to cover many cancers. The challenge with presumptions is that they flip the burden of proof on a claim. Instead of the injured worker needing to prove their illness is work-related, it is presumed work-related unless rebutted. This is a very difficult hurdle for employers to overcome. In recent years, the new presumption that is emerging is PTSD. The focus of these presumptions was initially first responders, but many states have expanded them to include dispatchers and other occupations. One of the challenges of these PTS presumption laws is that they created unequal outcomes for different workers exposed to the same incident. For example, the police or firefighters who responded to a workplace shooting would be eligible to file a claim for PTSD. However, the people actually working in the workplace where the shooting occurred could not. We are seeing a push in a number of states to make mental injuries compensable. And this year, Connecticut updated their statutes to allow all workers to file claims for PTSD. With the exception of COVID, presumptions have usually been limited to the public sector. However, in 2023, the state of Washington passed a PTSD presumption bill that applied to nurses. This far-reaching bill expands the presumptions into the private sector. This legislation is worth monitoring closely. First, what will its impact be on healthcare facilities in the state of Washington? Second, now that there's a blueprint, I expect to see similar legislation passed in other states. Kimberly?
All right. This is a topic I hear about so frequently, and that is cyber preparedness. Cyber attacks have increased exponentially in volume, velocity, and effectiveness, as published in Insurance Thought Leadership just recently. No matter how prepared you think you are, when a cyber attack happens, you learn what you didn't know. Chief Information Security Officers have long been concerned with cyber as it relates to infrastructure and email, for instance. However, understanding that interconnectivity of users, servers, cloud devices, web connections, data feeds, and the Internet of Things across your business is increasingly critical. Risk managers are keenly aware of the increasing risks to their business and work to quantify their organization's risks. They may report findings to the executive team and board for feedback on the organization's risk tolerance related to cyber. Cyber and disaster recovery systems are designed to recover from the unfortunate consequences of a cyber attack or data breach. Disaster recovery often focuses on business continuity following the cyber attack. Ensuring these two plans, the cyber recovery and the disaster recovery, are aligned is an important aspect of preparedness. We suggest creating a cyber planning task force to assist with developing your policies and procedures and workflow, and ultimately creating your company's cyber plan. Your company may have the disaster recovery plan, but again, having the cyber plan will help you understand who does what and when. We suggest creating this with a cross-company team so there's no confusion about who does what and when after a cyber attack occurs. It's also important to have clarity when you engage your cyber partners on their role, as confusion can lead to mistakes and delays. When there is an incident, stopping the threat and bringing systems back online is critical. Equally high on your priority list should be customer and stakeholder communication. Upholding client trust and brand reputation are important elements to consider. We all know companies that failed to disclose a cyber breach, causing angst and even litigation for those involved. Finally, the federal government under the Biden administration's National Cybersecurity Strategy is currently exploring whether a government backstop is needed for the cyber marketplace. This would be similar to TRIA and the terrorism risk marketplace. The concerns are that policy limits and exclusions currently in the cyber marketplace would leave cloud-based companies with inadequate protections in the case of a sustained outage. There has also been concern expressed on the market's ability to adequately cover the business interruption costs associated with a widespread attack, such as on the electrical grid, for example. Some feel it is premature to consider a federal backstop as the cyber market is developing. However, some larger cloud-based companies have expressed concern about potential gaps in coverage under the current marketplace and given limits and exclusions such companies are facing. Mark?
Next up is workplace violence, and workplace violence has been an issue to watch for several years. And unfortunately, this is an issue that just is not getting better. In healthcare and K-12 schools, workplace violence has been one of the leading causes of injury for several years. In addition, we've all seen the videos of violent robberies in retail locations. In certain cities, retail and restaurant workers have walked off the job because of unsafe conditions due to the threat of workplace violence. Large retail and restaurant chains have also closed location in certain cities because of theft and the constant threat of violence against their workforce. Law enforcement officers continue to face violent attacks with alarming frequency. According to data from the National Police Association, in 2023 there were 378 officers shot, which is up 60% compared to 2018. There were 115 ambush-style attacks on officers, and 46 were killed by gunfire. Anyone working closely with the public is exposed to workplace violence, but especially public entities, retail, healthcare, transportation, and education workers. Employers are increasingly focused on the safeness of their workplace, not just the workers' physical safety, but also their psychological safety. If workers do not feel safe at work, it adversely impacts their morale, job performance, and worker retention. The solutions to this problem are societal. Too often those committing the violence are not arrested, and if they are arrested, they're often not prosecuted. Without significant repercussions, these violent attacks are likely to continue in spite of employers' efforts to prevent them. Kimberly.
So moving from workplace violence, we've got employee well-being. Employers have spent a tremendous amount of time over the past 5 to 7 years focusing on mental health and well-being, some even longer. Benefit models offer mental health care, virtual and in-person care, and apps for meditation, mindfulness, deep breathing, stress reduction, and coping strategies. These programs wrap around the specialty and chronic care programs, along with EAP, employee assistance programs, and the health plan, encouraging engagement. Employee resource groups are doing great work around destigmatizing mental health discussions. At every opportunity, we must create an environment where employees feel safe to seek help when needed. Corporate and team culture matters, and companies have evaluated mission, purpose, and core values in support of a positive workplace. And pulse surveys often address well-being, providing meaningful insights across the business. You may recall that pulse surveys really became commonplace during the pandemic, and I'm pleased to say that they haven't gone away in most organizations I work with. Workplace violence, which Mark addressed, impacts well-being, along with repeated episodes and fear associated with the potential violence. Again, public sector, healthcare, retail, and education have heightened awareness of the need for psychological safety. An area of opportunity is to improve mental health and well-being literacy for your workforce and make that available on your company portal. Think of it as a one-stop shop for learning about why mental health matters, personally and professionally, signs and symptoms of potential issues, self-care, and treatment options. An easy place to access all of this important information. It's often very difficult to know where to go to at those times you or your family member, your coworker needs the most help. This toolkit will go a long way to support someone interested in learning more. And with the public entity work, the healthcare clients across both Mark and I and our business, we know that many organizations have these. So if you need some examples, reach out to us. We know there's many employers that will help share information on what they've been developing to support employee well-being in the workplace. Mark?
All right, we're down to our final two, and my last one is exclusive remedy. Since the exception of workers' compensation, lawyers have been trying to find a way around the exclusive remedy that is provided for workplace injuries. These suits are usually dismissed on summary judgment because the burden to overcome exclusive remedy is typically an intentional act or gross negligence, which is a very high burden to overcome. There were a number of challenges to the exclusive remedy of workers' compensation around COVID, with most of these claiming that the worker brought COVID home to their family from the workplace. However, for the most part, courts have not allowed these claims to be litigated. However, last year, there were two high-profile cases where the judges are allowing the claims to proceed on their merits and let a jury decide whether the burden to overcome exclusive remedy was met. Both these cases involve workplace shootings in Virginia. The plaintiffs allege that the employer knew of the risks and failed to take appropriate actions. The cases are worth monitoring because if the plaintiffs were to prevail, I would expect to see similar suits in other jurisdictions. Kimberly, finish us out.
All right, our last topic, and one that I really love, is implementing artificial intelligence. While some people are all in with AI, others are very skeptical. The fact is, it's here to stay. It's likely already involved in most of your daily activities with websites, those companies that you do business with, and certainly many of the partners and maybe even that your company works with, and maybe even your own. When thinking about implementing AI, contemplating your company's risk tolerance. Are you a first to market company or a wait and see? Are your internal stakeholders innovation drivers or steady as they go? Do you have clarity on use case scenarios where you might benefit from AI? Do you have the cost to implement and maintain such programs? What is your return on investment? And are your leaders willing to support the investment short and long term through the pitfalls of starts and stops? When considering use case scenarios across your business, some organizations think back room, maybe chatbots to help streamline processes. You may want to consider whether the deployment is solely an internal solution or how it impacts your customers. Generative AI, conversational AI, machine learning, and the suite of tech tools supporting AI have significant potential to change the way underwriting's performed, claims are lodged and processed, customer service interactions, and claim resolutions start to finish. What do I mean when I log on to an airport, or what do I mean by personalization? Because everyone wants a personalized experience. When I log on to an airline app, they know if I'm there to check in, select my meal, address a flight cancellation, or book a new flight. This level of personalization is what insurers are looking to build for their insureds. AI is already supporting expedited claims processing for lower dollar, high frequency claims in liability, auto, and the property space. The question is, will it begin to help us in workers' compensation? And potentially with fast track medical only claims? There's a lot of use case scenarios for workers' compensation, and we look forward to talking more about those this year in other Outfront Ideas sessions. Mark?
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us on Outfront Ideas with Kimberly and Mark. The archived recording of this broadcast will be available by the end of the day. We would like to thank Safety National and Cedric for their continued support of our Outfront Ideas. We couldn't do this without you. And finally, Kimberly and I look forward to seeing you at future industry events around the country. Let's all try to make 2024 a great year. Thank you for joining us. Have a great day.
Take care, everybody. Thanks for joining us.